She has a kind of mercurial quality that is absolutely unique.
It's to do with her absolutely extraordinary mind. Mind is not a quality that many people associate with actors, but the truth of the matter is it's all about thinking. I don't think there is another actor on earth who can make you see what she's talking about.
Maggie Smith comes from a very ordinary background. She was born in Ilford in Essex. When war broke out in 1939, her father was posted to Oxford. She had a very encouraging teacher at Oxford High School for Girls, and she found her way into the theatre. And of course in Oxford, she fell in with the Playhouse crowd and the students. And that's where she started working in revue with people like Ned Sherrin and the professional actors at the Playhouse.
You, in fact, made your name, really, as a review artist, didn't you,
Yes,
Maggie?
I started it.
Yeah. Did you enjoy doing review?
Well, it's a mixture, really. I didn't really want to do it. It was just one of those things that happened.
Yes.
I was at Oxford. I lived in Oxford. And I went to a drama school that started there, and I did so many things, you know, around the universities there. You know, if you were kind of clever enough and I suppose quick enough, you could almost do a weekly rep, because all the colleges were doing different productions at different times.
Right.
What Maggie Smith fell into was this culture of revue in the theatre, which is sort of disappeared now. Short, blackout sketches written by writers like Peter Cook, who went on to do Beyond the Fringe. At that time, there was a writer called Bamber Gascoigne, who wrote a review called Share My Lettuce. And there were lots of performers who were masters of this art. One today would still be Sheila Hancock, who is still a very flourishing actress like Maggie herself. And many of our playwrights wrote them. I mean, Harold Pinter first wrote review sketches and short radio plays. And so a lot of our playwriting and our modern theatre comes out of that tradition. Just before she did Private Lives on the West End stage in the early 70s, she shot these two films for the BBC. One was The Merchant of Venice, and one was The Millionairess by George Bernard Shaw.
What find I here? Fair Portia's counterfeit.
It's a rather comforting, old-fashioned production, but with some wonderful actors in it. I mean, Charles Gray as Antonio, I seem to remember, and there's a very good supporting cast right the way through. It's a sort of classic television production by Cedric Messina. And, of course, she's whiplash fast as Portia, and she rattled through it at a great pace, and she's very ferocious in the courtroom scene.
Are you acquainted with the difference that holds this present question in the court?
I am informed truly of the cause. Which is the merchant here and which the Jew?
Antonio and old Shylock both stand forth.
Is your name Shylock?
Shylock is my name.
Of a strange nature is the suit you follow. Yet in such rule the Venetian code cannot impugn you as you do proceed.
The Millionairess had been a big success for Peter Sellers and Sophia Loren, but it had strayed quite wildly from the play, and it's a beautiful play. And as Nancy Banks-Smith, the Guardian television critic, said, you know, what was wrong with having Maggie Smith sing Shaw for 90 minutes? She played Epiphania Fitzfasson, a very rich woman, who had a condition for her husband, had to turn £150, I think, into several £100,000. It's a fairly enjoyable performance. She looks ravishing in it, beautifully costumed, as she always is, and beautifully coiffed, and she's very funny.
Do you deny that you assaulted him?
Of course I deny it. Anything more monstrous I have never heard. What happened was he insulted my father grossly. It was most unprovoked, at a moment when I had every reason to expect the utmost tenderness from him.
This is not at all what we were led to expect.
I thought we were going to see the Arno.
The Signora distinctly wrote, south rooms with a view, and close together, instead of which she's given us north rooms without a view and a long way apart.
I first met Maggie Smith when I acted with her in A Room with a View. That was really the first time I ever met her. And, of course, our first meeting was blighted by my admiration for her. I blurted out various kinds of rubbish about her, and she kind of withdrew. She doesn't like that sort of thing very much at all.
Miss Barton.
Oh, Mr. Bede, what is happening to your neighbours?
Oh, alas, they're moving out. Old Mr. Emerson's rheumatism has come on, and George just thinks it's too far. In fact, Mr. Emerson's taking refuge from the movers inside.
Might I impose on your kindness and wait here for Mrs. Honeychurch?
By all means, I'm afraid...
I think Maggie was very wary of me at first on A Room with a View. I think she just thought I was a very loud, noisy, bull in a china shop kind of a person. And I don't think she warmed to me at all until we started to act together, and then she found that she enjoyed that, and suddenly it all melted away, and I think we got on very well then.
There's always a problem with great actors, and it doesn't matter who they are. There's always a problem about mannerisms, really. A lot of people thought Olivier was a very mannered actor. A lot of people today think Ian McKellen is a very mannered actor. And to a certain extent they are. They are who they are, and their mannerisms as people and as actors come with them. One of the things about Maggie Smith is she has this sort of self-generated motor of gesture, expression. She doesn't work on it. It just sort of happens naturally. It's really why she doesn't like talking very much about acting.
She never wanted to talk about acting. Acting was something she was terrified to talk about, because if she did, it would disappear. And then she told me a story about Laurence Olivier, out of which he doesn't come too well, which is that they were doing The Recruiting Officer together, and he'd said to her after, some months of the run, he said, "Maggie, it's so clever, so brilliant. What you do with that line, that laugh you get, it's so marvellous. How do you do it? How do you do it? What is it that you do? How do you do it? How do you..." He went on at some length about this, and eventually she told him, and she said, "And of course, I could never do it again, ever," which is exactly what he wanted. So I respect that perfectly well. Why not? I mean, she does something utterly extraordinary, but I don't think she necessarily understands it, which makes it a little alarming for her. She has a pretty good idea of what she's trying to do, but why it works, how it works, mysterious areas.
Well, it didn't strike me as very difficult. The awful thing is, I don't know quite how to explain it, but things get more and more difficult as you go on. When you start in the theatre, and I suppose really when you start with anything, you have a kind of extraordinary conceit. It doesn't really enter your mind that it is going to be as difficult as it is. It's the more you do, the more you realise that well, about my profession anyway, that it is an extremely difficult one.
In the late 80s, she played her first American heroine, really. It was her first American heroine, Mrs. Venable in Suddenly Last Summer by Tennessee Williams. It was directed by Richard Eyre. Famously, this role was played by Katharine Hepburn, if there's two iconic actresses in whose trail Maggie Smith operates, you'd have to say Edith Evans and Katharine Hepburn.
I guess I've seen everything that Maggie has done for the last 40 years. She's just simply a great actress. It was Natasha Richardson's idea. She was then married to a producer, Robert Fox, and Robert approached me and asked me if I would direct it. I was running the National Theatre, and I had a brief period, probably 2 months holiday that had accumulated. We shot the film on the same soundstage, completely coincidentally, as the Mankiewicz film, which had been shot, the one with Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift, which had been shot 20, 30 years before, which they shot. I remember because we were infuriated to discover that it was the same stage, and they'd shot over a period of about 12 weeks, and we had 11 days. Maggie wasn't terribly well, so a lot of the time she was quite tired, and it was very, very grueling. We rehearsed, I think, for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I rehearsed with Andrew Dunn, who was the director of photography, and in the latter stages also with the grips and the lighting technician, or the gaffer, and the soundman, because of having to shoot such a lot every day. So we had to plan the whole thing, choreograph the whole shoot in the studio.
Oh, we were a famous couple. People didn't speak of Sebastian and his mother, or Mrs. Venable and her son. They'd say Sebastian and Violet. Violet and Sebastian are staying at the Lido. They're at the Ritz in Paris. Sebastian and Violet. Violet and Sebastian have taken a house for the season at Biarritz.
Something I had hoped for, she gave probably more eloquently than I'd anticipated, which was that in the middle of this absolutely monstrous woman, whose behaviour was unforgivably vicious and mean, you see a kind of vulnerability, you see a sort of sadness, you see a kind of heartache for the absence of love in her life, and somehow there are 2 or 3 moments where she absolutely takes your breath away, and is astonishingly and unexpectedly moving.
Name it that, if you like. I don't care. There are just 2 things to remember. She's the destroyer. My son was the creator. Now, if my honesty has shocked you, pick up your little black bag and run away out of this garden without the subsidy in it. Nobody's heard our conversation but you and I, Dr. Sugar.
Miss Venable?
What is it, Miss Fox?
She is, I would think, probably intellectually the smartest actress I've ever worked with. You have to get up very, very early in the morning to outwit Maggie Smith. She's very, very well read. She's highly articulate, and she can be completely enchanting, and she can equally be, and sometimes quite unexpectedly, be quite savage.
There's a lot of talk about the word difficult when it comes to Maggie Smith. She's difficult because she is certainly temperamental, and she is a sort of virtuoso artist. I mean,